Good evening, America, and welcome to the Friday edition of Just the News, No Noise. Yep, we made it to Friday. What a week it's been. We've got a great way to wrap up the week with some big interviews, including a man who's had so much impact when it comes to whistleblowing, the head of the Empower Oversight Whistleblower Center, Tristan Levitt. He's going to be joining us in a few seconds. But before I turn to my amazing co-host, Amanda Head, like I do every time of this show, I want to just point out one story today. I think it says more about the Biden administration in a few words than we can say in a lot of others. I know people think about the border. I know they think about all the insanity and crime. They think about the wokeness in the military. All of those are concerning. But today, the CBO put out a report reminding us that at the end of the day, we are splending ourselves into oblivion. An extraordinary report by the bean counters on Capitol Hill, revealing that in 2024, America will spend more money on government than any time in our history outside of the crisis. Of course, the crisis of COVID back a couple of years ago. We're now at almost a quarter of GDP of government spending. That is an extraordinary threshold that many economists in the past warned could cause enormous long-term damage to the United States. The debt keeps growing, and when you look into the details, guess where all that money's going? It's going to pay for the interest rate increases that Joe Biden needed to stop the inflation increases that Joe Biden and his spending caused. It's a vicious cycle, one that I think everyone will have to have on their mind when they go vote at the November election. All right, with that said, it's a great time to turn to my amazing co-host, Amanda Head. Amanda, I know you got some other headlines that you're watching today.
Indeed, yeah. And I wanted to touch on some cultural news to start off. The first story being what is going on at the extremely woke Walt Disney Company. I think that if Walt could see what was happening to his company now, that he would be rolling over in his grave, because investigative journalist James O'Keefe has just exposed more about what is going on at the Mouse House. And as it turns out, Walt Disney himself probably wouldn't be welcomed himself there anymore. Take a look.
Certainly, there have been times where, there's no way we're hiring a white male person.
Just kind of unspoken.
There are times when it's spoken, but
how would they say it?
There's no way we're hiring a white male person.
Like straight to you, or okay?
They'd be very careful how they message that to agents. As far as Disney's concerned, I'm a white male. That's not who they're looking to promote at the moment. I've been at the company for 11 years now, so I have friends in HR and I have friends in those divisions. So they're like, look, nobody else is going to tell you this, Mike, but they're not considering any white males for this job. They're just not. That's not what they want.
Yeah, that was Senior Vice President at Disney, Michael Giordano, captured undercover by James O'Keefe's O'Keefe Media Group. And it isn't entirely shocking due to all of the woke nonsense that they've been putting out in their films and their TV shows over the last few years. But in America, it's still illegal to discriminate. So if any of this is true, Disney might have a big lawsuit on their hands. Now, Giordano also claimed that even a person who was half black was passed over for the promotion because they apparently didn't look, quote, black enough. Unquote.
We wanted to hire somebody in the department a few years ago now who was half black, but didn't appear half black. And there was a creative executive who was like, we're not, that's not what's wrong. They wanted somebody in meetings who would appear a certain way, and he wasn't gonna bring that to the meeting.
They should have just identified as all black. But anyway, it's just another example of the left's so-called anti-racism efforts that are just extraordinarily racist at the bottom of it all. But let me get into another battle on the culture war front. In Louisiana, a new law was passed requiring schools to post the 10 Commandments in the classroom. We covered this a few days ago. It's the only state to require that in the nation. And of course, the left is going out of their minds about it. We are seeing headlines like this from MSNBC. Louisiana's new mandate is the first step in a sinister vision for the country. And this also from Slate. Louisiana's new 10 Commandments law could not be any more unconstitutional, channeling a little bit of Chandler Bing. This has even generated a lot of debate from those on the right. Some see the law as destined to fail in front of the Supreme Court. But one person who is on board is President Trump. He wrote about it on Truth Social, stating this: I love the 10 Commandments in public schools, private schools, and many other places for that matter. Read it. How can we as a nation go wrong? John, I'm going to turn it back to you, but I just have to say, how could you possibly go wrong with ideas like loving your neighbor, don't murder, don't steal, being listed in a classroom?
The ideals we're all raised on now, somehow they're toxic to a certain portion of our Crazy culture. That's crazy. Yeah. You know what I'm going to do tonight? I'm going to go watch Snow White. That's what I'm watching for my Walt Disney watching tonight. Yeah. Later in the show, we're very lucky. We got Andrew Bailey joining us, and he just sued IBM for similar sort of sentiments in its hiring practices.
Yep.
I know I'm looking forward to that conversation. But before we get to all that, I can't wait to interview this next guest, our first guest of the night. He not only is running for the West Virginia House of Delegates, that's important, but as a defender of whistleblowers, there is no one on his par. He does such extraordinary work every day. He's the head of the Empower Oversight Whistleblower Center, and our good friend Tristan Levitt. Tristan, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Always great to be with you.
You had another big win today. Last week we talked about the FBI political litmus question test. The FBI asking people, do you vocalize support for Trump? Do you go to Second Amendment rallies? Do you have some hesitancy about the vaccine? And you don't get a security clearance. Jim Jordan caught his attention, chairman of the House Oversight Committee. He was on our show yesterday, talked a little bit about that. Wants the IG to investigate whether they're purging agents based on their conservative political views. Do you think what he says is potentially the end game of what we may find, that there's a purge going on over political views?
Yeah, absolutely. Like we shared on your show a couple of weeks ago, it's clear that this had become a litmus test in some of these clearance interviews. And again, it wasn't just about asking it about the employee. They're also forcing FBI employees to rat out their coworkers, if you will. Not that that should be anything to rat out. And so, as we've alluded to, we are continuing to hear from individuals within the FBI, including within the security division. And so I think we're going to find before the summer is out that a lot unravels. Something's rotten in the state of Denmark, and it's clear that things need to change there at the FBI.
Yeah, no doubt.
Absolutely. And I want to get back into the FBI in just a moment, but I want to focus right now on something that affects you directly because of your clients. That House Oversight is going to be investigating whether the U.S. Office of Special Counsel has contributed to the retaliation against the IRS whistleblowers Gary Shapley and Joseph Ziegler. This is a task that is specific to that office. They have their very own manual of how to carry out protection for whistleblowers, and yet they are doing the exact opposite, it appears, possibly?
Well, it's unusual for OSC, the Office of Special Counsel, to be involved in a case that is this high profile as the IRS whistleblowers on the Hunter Biden case. So obviously when Gary Shapley and Joseph Ziegler came forward last summer, they blew this news wide open. It resulted in the plea deal for Hunter Biden being rejected, even though that wasn't necessarily their goal. Their goal was just to shed a light on how DOJ had given him favorable treatment and how the charges that they had recommended were not being brought. Now that it has reached the status that it has, where David Weiss has been appointed as special counsel, notwithstanding his trying to give this sweetheart plea deal to Hunter Biden before, we're in a stage where there are questions about whether Weiss is trying still to retaliate against these whistleblowers. And so OSC kind of sucked into the middle of this. We learned recently that when David Weiss filed in California, the California criminal case is the one that Hunter Biden is going to be in trial for in September for the main tax charges. And David Weiss put information out there that implied that our clients, Gary Shapley and then Joe Ziegler, who also has additional counsel, that they were under investigation. And OSC saw that happen. In part, it was based on information OSC provided, and we wish OSC would have stepped up and made clear that that's not what they were doing. They are investigating whether David Weiss and people at the IRS were retaliating. So that silence there has been a little disappointing. I know they're trying to find out if there is any other context, but I think that's what Jim Jordan was getting at is, look, you have a responsibility to try and root out whistleblower retaliation, and you can't let your information be used by David Weiss against these individuals.
Yeah, so important. We need to protect whistleblowers. They are the key to integrity in our federal agencies, so important. Tristan, I want to turn to something else that kind of, I think, accentuates and affirms the great testimony that your clients gave. We now know that there was this cache of documents the FBI had going back in 2016, 3.39 million documents they got from Hunter Biden and all of his partners. One batch of those documents show that while Hunter Biden was dealing with the board, being on the board of Burisma, he was trying to arrange money from his boss, the man who ran Burisma, to a new venture in Liechtenstein. $120 million was going to come from Zolchevsky, the owner of Burisma, and Hunter and his partners would get 25% without putting any cash in. It's kind of a sweetheart deal. It's kind of odd that someone on a board who's supposed to provide fiduciary responsibility for the company is looking to score from the company at the same time on a side deal, right?
It would be odd if Hunter Biden were a typical board member, but we all know that that's not the case. That's not why he was on that board. That's not what it was about. It was about enriching himself, enriching his family. And of course, Burisma had a number of things they were hoping to get from it. So if a deal like that to sweeten the pot for Hunter Biden helped them to get their goals of getting out of the crosshairs of Viktor Shokin, the Ukrainian prosecutor, I'm not surprised at all that they would try and do that.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. I want to ask you about this hullabaloo out of Cleveland. Now, I know that my co-host, he is a consummate journalist, and it absolutely breaks his heart to see what has happened to the journalism industry. But this opinion piece by Neil Barron that I guess technically in this case it's libel, not slander, but with respect to Garrett O'Boyle and the other two FBI whistleblowers, it seems to me that there's a pattern emerging, which is that they print something, and maybe they know it's false, maybe they don't. But in this case, I think that it wasn't just a case of bad opinions. It was factually wrong. And then they retract it, and then there are maybe 5% of the original readers who saw the retraction. And then we end up with this situation where it's a 95% net positive for them because they got the information out there. How do we stop this cycle?
I think you have to hold people accountable. So if we had not reached out to the Cleveland plain dealer and pointed out that what they said about Garrett O'Boyle, as well as Marcus Allen, two of our current clients, was just completely made up out of whole cloth, right? It just would have stood out there. And I think it is part of a bigger trend, like you say, going back to a year ago when I testified before the weaponization subcommittee. That hearing started by Stacey Plaskett saying these individuals are a threat to our national security. And of course, a year later, we were able to get Marcus Allen's security clearance reinstated. And so I think both following up on the facts to prove people wrong, but again, when people are just blatantly lying, we have to do what we can to hold them accountable. And so we are looking at that.
Would you sue?
Say again?
I was going to say, would you sue?
It depends on the circumstances. In this case, since they retracted it so quickly, that's certainly a factor you would take into consideration. But in general, yeah, you have to go that extra mile. That's part of one of the things that Hunter Biden has used so successfully is suing so many individuals, and that's why we intervened in his lawsuit against the IRS. So if the facts are there to back it up, or the law, it's not really, the facts are there that are bad. If the law backs that up, and I'm not a defamation attorney, but absolutely you have to do things to make a cost, make it, create a penalty for people who lie just so shamelessly.
Yeah, no doubt.
Make it hurt.
Yeah. Tristan, you have so many other clients and so many other aspects of government where we're beginning to see wrongdoing. Can you tell us a little bit of some of the other work that Empower Oversight is doing? We've got about a minute left, but you guys are doing some really important groundbreaking stuff.
Yeah, we continue to have so many whistleblowers come out of the woodwork on a lot of policies related to this administration. And some of those, a lot of them are related to the FBI right now, but we're seeing them from other places like the Department of Education, like the IRS. And what they really just highlight is you have to have transparency and you have to protect these sorts of people. And so, one of the things that is a lot on people's minds at the moment is the Title IX regulations. That's something we're looking at closely because, again, you have instances where if you have whistleblowers, you want to make sure that they are protected and what they share, that they're able to make those disclosures in a way that is safe for them. So a lot of exciting things to come. But at the same time, sad that this is the state we're in, that people have to make these disclosures.
Yeah, no doubt. Real quickly, Tristan, for people who want to get involved with Empower Oversight, watch the work you do, what's the best way for them to stay in touch or to donate?
EmpowerOversight.org is the best way to learn about our organization, and you can also donate specifically for law enforcement whistleblowers at defendwhistleblowers.com.
Defendwhistleblowers.com. Remember, that's a good one. All right, Tristan, always great to have you on the show. You're doing such groundbreaking work. It's such an honor to get to learn from you every time. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey, he has been on a tear, 4 or 5 major litigations from the border to, get a load of this, he's suing New York on behalf of Missouri, saying the prosecution of President Trump was an interference in Missouri's elections. That's a big one. It just happened this morning. We've got him exclusively next after the...
Welcome back, everybody, to Just the News, No Noise. I'm Amanda Head, joined, as always, by my esteemed co-host and Just the News editor-in-chief, John Solomon. Now, we want to bring in a man who is fighting for the rights of Missourians as well as all Americans, including President Trump. He announced yesterday that he is filing suit against the state of New York for what amounts to election interference. I'm talking, of course, about Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey. Thank you so much for being here, sir.
Thanks for having me on.
Sir, I want to start at the beginning. I know that you are requesting documents and any types of communications. What are you looking for in all of that?
Well, we've demanded documents from Biden's crooked Department of Justice. We know there's a relationship between the DOJ and these state-level prosecutions. This illicit witch hunt of President Trump starts at the top, and it extends down to New York and to Georgia. President Biden's crooked Department of Justice has deployed resources in the form of Matthew Colangelo, the former third-ranking official in Biden's Department of Justice and a longtime DNC consultant, to then lead the trial team prosecution in Alvin Bragg's office against President Trump to obtain this illegal, invalid conviction. And so we need to expose that for what it is. It's time we stop looking at these cases and these efforts to silence President Trump in isolation and see the forest and not just the trees.
Yeah, it's so important. And you have so many important cases on the front lines that I think are addressing what Americans have been crying for help for. One of them involves the trafficking of minors when it comes to getting them abortions out of state, often without their parents' permission. Could you tell us the important win that you scored this week against Planned Parenthood in St. Louis?
Yeah, and all this started late last year when a video surfaced that revealed that there were agents of a Planned Parenthood clinic in the Kansas City area bragging about how they assisted minors every day in traveling across state lines, forging documents, avoiding the necessity of parental consent to help them obtain abortions. This violates state law here in Missouri. And so we launched a lawsuit to put an end to it. And look, this is a pattern and practice of behavior by Planned Parenthood, a willful refusal to comply with state statutes that relate to the health and safety of women and children. And at the end of the day, Planned Parenthood is putting the destruction of human life ahead of the health and safety of women and children. No one should have any confidence that they have any ability or willingness to provide what would amount to legitimate health care at this point. So we've taken them to court. They filed a motion to dismiss. We defeated that motion to dismiss, and the judge certified our lawsuit will move forward. We will hold wrongdoers accountable.
Wow, important stuff.
Well, and I would think there are also health department issues because they've violated health codes on numerous occasions. They have refused to inform patients of the risks, refused to document any type of complications. What type of far-reaching repercussions does this have for Planned Parenthood in the future, for all 50 states, really?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we should eliminate Planned Parenthood from its operation. They should no longer be allowed to operate in the state of Missouri. We've got to defund them. Certainly, our legislature has taken significant steps in that direction. I've encouraged the Department of Social Services that oversees our Medicaid program to do the same because, again, they've refused to comply with the law. In 2018, they were caught using a moldy abortion machine on women. We're not talking about a piece of equipment that was used and then sat in the corner. We're talking about one they were actively using to terminate human life and putting the safety of the mother at risk. And like you said, those notification statutes are about the risks of the procedures they're performing, and they refuse to then provide those notifications to patients. They have no interest in serving patients in a safe or ethical manner here in Missouri. It's time they go because they cannot comply with state statute.
An amazing case. We're going to be keeping a close eye on that. You also have been very active in trying to protect Americans from the effects of the open border. This week, I think you sent notice to all those sanctuary cities and states. If you're caught moving an illegal alien in Missouri, it's a felony. We're going to prosecute. How important a message is that? And do you see a case coming up on that now that you put the warning out?
Yeah, look, this started when the mayor of Kansas City, a progressive leftist, invited illegal aliens into Kansas City. This is a city that is struggling with crime right now. We have working Missouri families looking for jobs. Why is he trying to give those jobs to people who don't belong here in the first place? Let's put Americans first, like President Trump did, instead of the criminal aliens. And once we called him out on it, he has shifted fire and said, well, look, I'm just talking about the ones with work permits. The problem is they gained those work permits through Biden's illegal parole process. That's why we filed suit against the Biden administration against his perversion of the law to turn the parole process into a visa program never authorized by Congress. But that's not the end of it. We put him on notice that it is a felony offense to knowingly transport a criminal alien into or through the state of Missouri, and we've taken action against businesses who are hiring illegal workers. This is an effort to end human trafficking in the state of Missouri. Since Biden took office, there have been more criminal aliens that have crossed our southern border than the entire population of the state of Missouri. There's been 1,500 fentanyl deaths in Missouri in 1 year alone, more than 1,100 instances of human trafficking. That's no accident. It's a direct result of President Biden's open border policies, and the Biden invasion is making Missouri communities less safe. We're not going to let progressive city leaders make it worse. We're going to use the tools at our disposal to fight back.
Yeah, really important.
Awesome. I love it. And you've been so busy, we're going to have to shift gears again. There are very few industries that have escaped the cancer of DEI, but you have taken action, at least within the tech industry. Tech giant IBM, with their diversity quotas, what have they been up to?
Well, another video surfaced late last year that included the CEO of IBM bragging about enforcing racist quota systems to disadvantage whites, disadvantage Asians, who he claims are not underrepresented in the tech industry. Who cares about the color of someone's skin? How about the content of their character, the quality of their character, and their merit, their ability to achieve at a high level? Well, clearly IBM's CEO doesn't care about that, because he would rather promote people based solely on the color of their skin. Not only is it illegal because it violates the Missouri Human Rights Act that prohibits discrimination in the workplace and employment decisions, but it's really insulting to the people he's giving jobs to and promoting, because essentially what he's telling them is they're not good enough. He had to get them to where they are through racial gerrymandering. It's also really scary to any customers of IBM who should be asking themselves, is IBM still willing to produce a quality product? Are they more concerned about pushing a racist, divisive ideology?
Yeah, so really remarkable. Today, sir, there was a hearing down in Florida in Judge Eileen Cannon's court about whether Jack Smith's appointment as prosecutor was unlawfully done because he hadn't been confirmed by the Senate as a prosecutor. You've been involved in a part of that case. Missouri is one of several Republican states asking the court to stop the gag order. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why it matters to Missourians?
Well, this is an illegal witch hunt prosecution by a two-tiered justice system coming from Biden's crooked Department of Justice. President Biden is using Jack Smith to take President Biden's primary political opponent, President Trump, off the campaign trail. That's what this is about, and they're breaking the law to do it. Look, the First Amendment protects not only a speaker's right to say things, but listeners' rights to hear. And at the end of the day, we're in the middle of a presidential campaign, and President Trump just isn't a normal citizen. He's a candidate, a leading candidate for President of the United States. Missourians deserve to hear from him. The court is trying to violate that principle by silencing him through a gag order. That's why we've become involved in this litigation.
Yeah, important.
Sir, I want to tie that in with something that we were discussing with you at the top of the block, because I consistently hear people saying, you've got Biden officials, Democrats, conducting all of this lawfare across this country, prosecuting President Trump. Why aren't, red state attorneys general doing something about it? And I say, aha, I know at least one who's doing something, General Bailey. But I want to ask you about that with respect to what type of remedy we could be looking at, whether we're talking about Alvin Bragg and Tish James in New York, or Jack Smith or Fani Willis. What type of legal relief could be on the table for the American people? Is it disqualification? Is it, even as far as disbarment, some type of civil action? What's on the table?
I think you're right. I think there are several tools at our disposal there. Number one, I think these prosecutors that are exceeding the scope of their statutory authority and violating the president's constitutional rights are subjecting themselves not only to civil liability, but also professional licensure problems. I think at some point when we receive the documents and can expose the criminal behavior, it'll be time to prosecute the prosecutors. But I'm proud to announce that Missouri is filing suit against the state of New York in the United States Supreme Court to put a stop to the lawfare. This is election interference at its worst. Alvin Bragg, a rogue prosecutor, is going to deny Missourians the right to hear and have access to a presidential candidate? Not on my watch. Under Article 3, Section 2 of the United States Constitution, the Supreme Court has original jurisdictions when states have conflicts with other states. Well, Missouri has a big problem with New York right now. We are taking them to court and are going to fight to put a stop to it.
Going to be pretty extraordinary. It could be one of the big constitutional cases of our lifetime in election law if the court accepts it. So I want to just step back from this last week. We have a 12-year-old girl lured under a bridge, killed by illegal aliens, a mom of 5 killed by illegal aliens, a 13-year-old girl in New York raped by illegal aliens in the middle of the day. The human toll is really beginning to add up, and I know you're doing everything in your state. When you step back, is this a moment where multiple states may bond together and try to sue President Biden or sue Mayorkas and make them responsible for the toll that they're imposing on everyday Americans?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the point we've come to, because we can't get any relief anywhere else. Look, I'm proud to be working with other states in 3 different lawsuits to end the catch and release program, Biden's illegal catch and release program at the border, to put a stop to his abuses of the parole process. And we just won the lawsuit to force President Biden to finish building President Trump's border wall. That's a huge win, but it's not enough. We've got to do more. I was proud to testify in Congress in the impeachment proceedings against Secretary Mayorkas because he's unlawfully refusing to do his job. And shame on the Senate for not convicting him for his failure to execute the duties of his official office.
Yeah. Is there a bigger lawsuit you might be contemplating right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, all options are on the table. The heart and soul of our nation's at risk. I mean, we're fighting back on 3 strategic fronts, lawfare being one of them, and I'm proud to announce that lawsuit against the state of New York to fight back against lawfare. The open border failures, certainly we're looking at more options there on top of the work we've already done. And finally, free speech. Again, we're waiting for the case Missouri v. Biden to come down any day to end government censorship on big tech social media platforms, to allow Americans to have a free, fair, and open discourse in the public domain.
So important.
Yeah, sir, I am always so proud to push back on people when they say, where are the Republican attorneys generals? Because I know that you are doing so much, and you are gathering with other attorneys general to do the same. Thank you so much for being here, sir.
Thank you all.
Thank you, sir.
All right, everybody. Coming up after this break, we're going to have the Trump-backed challenger to Washington Congressman Dan Newhouse on the show to explain how he's going to help grow the Republican advantage in the House. That's next.
Welcome back, America. A little breaking news just a few minutes ago. A judge in Nevada threw out the criminal case against 6 alternate electors who tried to help President Trump back in 2020 in that state. For more headlines on that, go check out justthenews.com. We got you covered. All right, we've been talking on this show a lot about the enthusiasm that Republicans have in many of the blue states on the East Coast, New York, New Jersey. You see it all the time. The same thing's going out on the West Coast, in Washington state particularly. And one candidate who has won the endorsement in that state from President Donald Trump is joining us right now. He's running for Dan Newhouse's seat, and he's got a great chance of flipping that. He is Jared Sessler, and he joins us right now. Jared, be on the show.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Amanda. Happy to be here.
On the endorsement. That's a big deal. You bring some interesting experience here. You're a NASCAR driver formerly, right?
Yeah, now I've passed that on to my boys. In fact, my oldest son won the Quincy Grand Prix last weekend, and I'm going to watch him race again tomorrow night, which should be pretty good. And a veteran, served our country, been in business for about 3 decades, married for almost that amount of time, raised and homeschooled 3 kids, and not really consider myself ever really a politician, but America needs some good, strong people with integrity and the ability to lead. And I think that's what our framers intended when they designed the House of Representatives. So here I go.
Very cool.
Here you go. And congratulations to your son. Tell us about the nature of your district, because we are seeing a lot of districts across the country that might have traditionally voted Democrat being affected by a lot of this administration's policies and possibly shifting the other direction. Talk to us about that with respect to your district.
Yeah, this district is interesting. It's actually the most conservative district on the West Coast. It's about a plus 24, plus 25, meaning about 3/4 of the district will vote Republican. And so that's a big bonus. And the truth is, what I always tell people is, with the super blue districts, they get, the complete weirdos like Adam Schiff and Jerry Nadler and Nancy Pelosi, but super red districts like this one should have a super conservative representative who's willing to go on offense. And I think that's one of the problems that we see with Republicans who we grew up watching is they just don't know anything about offense. We're sitting here in the middle of a revolution, and our Republican elected are pretending like they're standing up and fighting for status quo, and it's just not good enough.
Yeah, I think you're right. When you're out in the trail and you're talking to people, what are the big issues on the West Coast in your district? What are you hearing from voters?
Well, I think, the big issue, I think, is probably the same as what you guys are experiencing, and that's that, people want to be able to afford life again, and it's just too expensive right now. The other thing that's really important, and, we live in farmland here. It's absolutely beautiful, but people don't feel safe in America anymore. And if you look at, if there's one thing that the federal government is responsible for, it's to keep us safe. Just read the Declaration of Independence. It's very clear. And, President Trump has done a great job with that. And I also think that a lot of the people in the district, they want to see a representative. They want to see a Congress that's going to go on offense and protect them. And Kash Patel has also endorsed me, in addition to President Donald Trump and General Flynn, many members of the House who sit around, seatmates to the congressman that I'm working to replace, Dan Newhouse, and as well as the House Freedom Caucus. So I'll have a team as soon as I get there that represents at least 10% of Congress to be able to make sure that we can get some good stuff done for the American people.
Yeah, important.
Yeah, I love that. And I know the people of that district care about that, especially with respect to agriculture and the farming industry. Washington 4 is a beautiful area for natural resources and farming. Talk to us about those policies of this administration that have really been a depression for the people of your community.
It is, and I'll tell you that this administration has made a mockery of the farmers in America, and Dan Newhouse has done little about that. And I'm just going to tell you one thing about farmers that most people don't know. I've been in business for over 30 years myself. I pretty much grew up working in business, and the difference between farmers and every other industry is when your fuel cost and your fertilizer and your raw goods and your labor and your insurance and everything else go up. You just raise your prices. Well, guess what? Farmers can't do that. Farmers get paid what the market pays them. And it's an atrocity that we are putting farmers in this incredibly difficult situation with very little support, very little amount of the farm bill actually going to support farmers, and that needs to change. Again, it's time for Republicans to go on offense and start taking back ground. It's not good enough to fight for status quo. We've got to start fighting for the farmers, for the business people, for average Americans just like me, and start taking some land back here in America.
Yeah. Let me ask, how big a deal is Dan Newhouse's prior support for impeaching President Trump in the first term? Does that play at all in this election?
It's a tremendous deal. During the last primary, there were 7 Republican candidates, of which I was one of them. And it was so split and fractured that Dan Newhouse was able to get through and get another term with only about 25% of the vote in the district. And so that tells you how bad it was. That was worse than Liz Cheney's performance. And but because there were so many candidates, he was able to get through. It's not going to happen this time. And in fact, going into filing week, I had him beat by 17 to 19 points, and he was panicking. And of course, I had President Trump's endorsement and many other endorsements. And so he had to recruit some people to get in the race to split the vote to see if he could get himself another term. And it's just not going to happen. This district is 100% done with Dan Newhouse.
Really fascinating. Well, it's a race that everyone's going to be watching, and will have a tremendous impact, I think, in the fall. Jared, real quickly, for people who want to support you, what's the best way for them to get to know you, donate, and get involved in your campaign?
Yeah, just look up Jared Sessler, jaredsessler.com, or @Sessler on Twitter. Happy to chat with folks, and certainly appreciate the support. I'm the only candidate in this race who is funded by the grassroots. The other candidates are taking PAC money, which I refuse to do.
It's a big deal, for sure. Jared, great to have you on. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, Justin Goodman from the White Coat Waste Project. We're going to talk about dangerous research in China. Hold on for that, right after these messages. Hello, America. This July, as we celebrate the birth of our nation, it's important to reflect on the freedoms our forefathers fought for. But today, these freedoms are under attack. Look no further, most Americans say, than the treatment of President Donald Trump. If the left can go after him, they can and will come after the rest of us. That's why now, more than ever, we need to stick together and fight back. AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens, is more than just a senior discount organization. AMAC is dedicated to protecting our conservative values and defending our rights. Learn more about how AMAC is actively fighting for our freedom by visiting amac.us/justnews. By joining AMAC, you're not just becoming a member, you're becoming part of a movement. This July 4th, let's pledge to stand united. Join AMAC today and ensure that our voices are heard. amac.us/justnews is where you go. Together, we can make a difference.
Welcome back, everybody, to Just the News, No Noise. Let's turn now to Dr. Fauci. Now, I spoke a little bit about him yesterday. He has been in the news recently because of his testimony a couple weeks ago up on Capitol Hill, and because he has a new book on call because he is not getting that fat paycheck from the government anymore, I suppose. And speaking of that testimony, though, Dr. Fauci finally admitted that he did sign off on a program that the mainstream media really didn't want to cover. And that was Fauci. We got to play a clip.
The experiments that the NIH funded go through strict regulatory processes of the treatment of animals, the humane treatment of animals.
Well, they're not very humane, and I will say, as the former director, you signed off on these experiments, and so my time has expired, and we will.
Well, I signed off on them because they were approved by a peer review.
Oh boy, I think I need glasses. Anyway, joining us now is a member of the group that exposed all of this from the White Coat Waste Project. He is Senior Vice President there, Justin Goodman. Justin, thanks so much for being here. Your reaction to Anthony Fauci's testimony?
Well, we feel vindicated. We've been following Fauci's money since 2019. Early 2020, we first exposed how he funded the Wuhan laboratory that probably caused COVID. And then 2021, we broke our Beaglegate investigation, showing that he was funding horrible, wasteful, cruel experiments on dogs, both at home and abroad, including that lab that you showed the image of, this now viral image of these beagles who were drugged and placed in cages full of biting flies so the flies could eat their faces and ears alive. At the time, we now know that Fauci coordinated, just like he did with Wuhan, Fauci coordinated a cover-up where he asked his colleagues to look into the issue and then abused his authority and worked with government employees, the press, journal editors, and rallied all of them to feed disinformation to the press to defend him against Beaglegate and to discredit White Coat Waste. Newspapers like the Washington Post ran cover stories calling this a fake Beagle research claim. We proved through documents we got through the Freedom of Information Act he had funded this exact lab and that experiment. He denied it. Now we have the receipts after that testimony where he finally fessed up. The Washington Post went back and ran a new fact check saying, actually, yes, NIH fed us disinformation. We willingly ran with it, but White Coat Waste was right.
Yeah. And that you have been on so many issues, whether it's protecting animals or just getting to the absurdity of some of our expenditures. And on that, I want to focus on something. About 2 years ago, I did a project here at Justin News that focused on all the funding that the NIH and other and its grantees were doing, supporting China in research that was directly tied to military institutions that our intelligence committee had been warning about for years. A lot of people were shocked by that. I guess it's not that shocking, but there's another jaw dropper this week. I know you probably been familiar with this. The new DoD IG report, Justin, basically says the Pentagon doesn't really know what it's funding when it sends money for biological pathogen research in China. Am I misstating that report at all?
No, that's exactly right. And not only that, their tweet basically admitted, the IG's tweet said, we are sending money to China for dangerous research with viruses that could cause pandemics, but we have no idea how much. And basically the report goes into detail. It's heavily redacted. They actually redact the details of the projects they're funding. But Joni Ernst, Senator Joni Ernst from Iowa, who requested this report in the National Defense Authorization Act last year, that's how we got this report. So credit to her. Yeah. She asked specifically about research related to causing pathogens that can cause pandemics like COVID, Ebola, Nipah, things that can wipe out millions of people very easily. And the report that came back, again, it's redacted, but it makes clear the DoD is shipping tax dollars to China, to institutions connected to the CCP, the PLA, and they are not following the money once it gets there, and they have no idea how our tax dollars are being spent.
Mind-boggling.
So how then can anyone at DoD or NIH or NIAID, I know the left hand oftentimes doesn't talk to the right, but then how can anyone claim that the funding we know for sure is not going to this certain type of research?
They can't. And the evidence we have found time and time again shows that they are funding these type of dangerous animal experiments that can cause a pandemic. That's exactly what we uncovered in Wuhan, where Fauci repeatedly denied publicly funding gain-of-function experiments on humanized mice with bat coronaviruses, but privately worried that the experiments he funded in Wuhan caused the pandemic. The DoD, EcoHealth Alliance was the funder that was shipping Fauci's money to the Wuhan lab. The DoD has been the single largest funder of EcoHealth since the pandemic started. EcoHealth has raked in over $60 million of new taxpayer funding, and the DoD, specifically its weapons of mass destruction programs, have been responsible for half the funding going to EcoHealth Alliance and then distributed to laboratories and virus hunting programs all around the world to collect these viruses that are out in nature, that humans in some cases would never have contact with, and bringing them in the laboratory to supercharge them. They would claim for biodefense, but I think anyone with a brain at this point knows that this is bioweapons development, and we're footing the bill for it.
Yeah, that's really the danger. And that's been the warning that our intelligence community's been giving. Just no one in the science community seems to follow it. Jason, I want to ask about a great line. Every time when Fauci testifies, he's got some whopper lines that you have to literally unpack before you realize he said nothing. But there's a famous line in this IG report saying the Pentagon said it wouldn't knowingly fund gain of function, but they're not sure if they did. It's just shocking, isn't it, incumbent for them to know before they send the money they're not doing it?
Yeah, I guess this gives them plausible deniability. They can say, well, that's not what we intended the money for. I mean,
right.
Exactly to your point. Fauci said the exact same thing. He always said we did not willingly or knowingly fund gain of function in Wuhan. Now, we know that was a lie because his staff coordinated specifically with EcoHealth in emails back in 2016 to subvert the gain of function ban, because they said, oh, this is gain of function. How are you going to do this? And they let EcoHealth rewrite the rules and continue the gain of function experiments that probably led to COVID. But I guess that's, maybe their lawyers tell them to, be careful with what you say in these reports. But I think it's clear that the DoD's tentacles run deep abroad. We know they're funding for EcoHealth Alliance, over 26 million just since the pandemic that EcoHealth probably caused began. They've still been giving them tens of millions of dollars for this reckless virus hunting and animal experimentation in foreign countries that are not only our adversaries, that are completely unaccountable. They do not have to follow U.S. regulations related to lab oversight. There's an illegal NIH loophole that exempts them from following lab safety laws and animal welfare laws in these countries. It's just a free-for-all, as Jeremy Farrar said from the Wellcome Trust and the Fauci emails. It's the Wild West over there, and it's absolutely true.
Yeah. Justin, we've just got about a minute left. I know it technically doesn't matter because whether the funding happens here or in China or wherever the case may be, it's still American taxpayers' money. But do these types of experiments ever happen stateside?
They do, unfortunately. I mean, we've definitely found examples of dangerous gain of function. I mean, the ban that was in place from 2014 to 17 was prompted actually by experiments happening at the University of Wisconsin that Fauci was funding to make bird flu viruses more contagious to mammals, and they successfully did that. It scared the hell out of everyone, and that's why the Obama administration at the time put the ban in place. So yes, absolutely, they are happening here on our shores, and actually EcoHealth is being funded right now by the NIH to set up a new bat lab in Colorado, ship in bats from Asia and infect them with COVID, Nipah, Ebola, and other viruses, and start doing this on our own soil. We're trying to stop this program in its tracks before it starts.
Wow.
Oh, what could possibly go wrong? Senior Vice President at the White Coast Waste Project, Justin Gibbon, thanks so much for joining us. And everybody, go sign up for their emails. I get them dropped into my email box every day or a couple of times a week, and it's really, really vital information. All right, coming up, we're going to speak to a women's lacrosse coach who was punished for expressing her views that women's sports should be for women only. Novel idea. We'll be right back.
When Leah Thomas won, I reposted a post that said, "Congratulations to Emma Weyant." One of my own players took that post and sent it in an email to my athletic director. She's a player I was really close to, and I was shocked. I was told that there was going to be now a meeting with my entire team, with the athletic director, with the Title IX director for our department, with the DEI person for our department. Chairs were set up in a huge circle. I felt like I was burned at the stake. I felt like I was stoned and hanged all at the same time. It was what I would call the mob mentality, where a few people on the team spoke about how much they were upset with what I posted and how How dare I post that?
Well, what you just saw was part of former Oberlin women's lacrosse coach Kim Russell's story. And you can see that Oberlin was very much not happy with her expressing support for and trying to protect actual women's sports. And now more than ever, we have to fight to protect it because President Biden's administration has essentially rewritten Title IX to include protections for biological males. With us now to discuss more about this, former Oberlin College women's lacrosse coach Kim Russell. Kim, thanks so much for being here.
It's such a pleasure to be with you both.
Wow.
Kim, it feels like we are in a bizarro world. I have to ask you, over the course of this situation, when you were being questioned, and I know you said you felt like you were being burned at the stake, the people who were trying to exact punishment on you, do they actually feel that way? Did they ever come to you on the side and say, hey, we're sorry about this? Because this, honestly, like I said, it just feels like bizarro world.
It does. I had been in the area of higher education for long enough, coaching at the college level, and over the last few years had seen what I would call a brainwashing of not just students, but faculty and staff as well. And so I believe what the players thought is that they were protecting teammates and friends who weren't sure of their identities.
Extraordinary thing. A lot has happened since this. The Title IX rule change is obviously a big part of that. What do women who participate in sports, coaches, think that Title IX will do to the future of women's sports?
Oh gosh, this is where I get really angry because as soon as you allow one biological male to participate on a women's team, that means you have to allow every roster spot to be open to anyone who identifies as a woman on that given day. That means the entire roster could be taken up by actual men. So where do the opportunities for girls go? Not only that, but you're allowing any biological male into a girl's or woman's private space. That means locker room or bathroom. And what does that entail? And what are we teaching girls by saying, ignore your gut instinct that it's not safe to have a man in the locker room, be quiet. We are grooming them to be sexually assaulted and trafficked. And just by allowing and knowing that a man could walk into their bathroom, that's sexual harassment in itself.
Yeah. And these female players, you know, I hate it because I don't think that they should have to give up their careers and their hobbies and their sports that they love. But I feel like at this point, the only way to stand up against it, the only way to stop it is for women to say, that's it, I'm not participating.
Yeah, so there are people on both sides of that who believe if you watched the young middle school girls in West Virginia who stood up and all stepped up to the shot put, walked up and walked away and did not participate, that to me showed true courage. The issue is we're making 13-year-old girls do the work that the adults are not doing. And that is not fair. There is already so many pressure on these kids. And to ask them to carry this torch is really not fair. The ones who should be carrying the torch are the administrators, the parents, and the coaches. And because of where we are today, everyone is afraid to speak up. And what I'm asking everyone to do is to step into your courage, because the more people who speak up, courage begets courage. And I have had so many people reach out to me to say, since I heard you speak, or since I saw your video, I stood up, whether it was at work or in another group. So I am just asking people, have the courage. It is worth it. Fight for our girls. Fight for the next generation of girls.
So important.
Former Oberlin College women's lacrosse coach Kim Russell. Kim, I hope that you have so many opportunities to get your voice out there. Your story is so important. Thank you for your courage. All right, everybody, that's all the time we have for tonight, unfortunately. But fortunately, Grant Stinchfield is up next, and we will see you on Monday. Have a great weekend.
Hey folks, if you're like me, your home is your castle and it's likely your most precious and valuable asset. So why aren't you protecting it? Homes across America are being stolen in a scam called title theft. That's why you need home title protection. Think about this. If no one is watching out for your title, then it's just a matter of time until one of these cyber thieves target you. Don't fall prey to these thieves. Go to HometitleLock.com to make sure your title is safe and use the promo code JustNews. They'll send you a complete title scan of your home's title and you'll get 30 days free of triple lock home title protection. That's a great deal. Go to HometitleLock.com, use the promo code JustNews. Protect your castle. It's a smart thing to do.
Let's make them wonder. Let's squeeze them for a change instead of them constantly squeezing us. And then, finally,